So you know me, Lee, bluffing aggressively yet again. I go ahead and make it 160, and then the big blind is in the tank. She starts talking to me and she says, "You've either got the nuts or you've got nothing at all." G'day poker people, welcome back. One Sunday afternoon I was definitely in the mood to start gambling, so I was originally planning to go to the Hard Rock to play some 2-5. Then I realised they were running a tournament that day, and getting in a cash game would actually probably be pretty hard because there'd be most of the tables just taken up for the tournament. So in lieu of that, I decided to drive down to Sarasota to get some vlog footage for you guys as well as grind the 2-5 there. But when I actually got to Sarasota, I realised there were no 2-5 tables running. There wasn't even an interest list to start a 2-5 game. So that was a bit of a bust, but I decided to myself, you know what? I'm already halfway to Bonita Springs. I know there's going to be 2-5 games running there. Why don't I just make a whole trip out of it and finish off there? So that's what I did. I ended up booking a hotel room to stay overnight in Bonita Springs so I could get in a proper session. And that's what I did. I showed up at about 6 p.m. to the Bonita Springs poker room and started off in some 1-2 where I played about 55 minutes and lost $90-something. So yep, again, wailing at the 1-2, but we finally get called into the 2-5 game. Kind of crazy. We woke up at like 11 a.m. and now it's 7 p.m. we're finally getting in a game, but I'm not going to complain because we've got an action-packed session for you guys. So let's not waste any more time and get to gambling. Let's go! So almost an hour after getting there, we are finally in the 2-5 streets for 800 bangers. Kind of funny that the 2-5 game has a smaller buy-in than the 1-3 game, but beggars can't be choosers. I'm just happy to be in the action where we play this first interesting hand. The action falls to my button and I peel 9-2 of hearts. I'm probably opening any suited cards here as long as the blinds aren't aggressive 3-betters, which they aren't in this instance, so I go ahead and make it 15, and then I get called by a tight aggressive big blind. So it heads up to a flop of King, Queen, Jack, a rainbow. When the action checks to me, definitely want to be somewhat cautious on this board. The opponent is going to have all of the 2 pairs and all of the straights on this board. Having said that though, still want to stab in position. The opponent's going to have plenty of natural folds and we just want to make EV when they do have that part of their range. So I go ahead and make it 15, and then the big blind calls. So not ideal, but when the turn is the 7 of hearts, it gives us a flush draw. The opponent checks it over to me again, and I definitely want to keep stabbing, but got to use a small size here because the opponent might have trapped occasionally with a straight or 2 pair on the flop, just thinking that I c-bet anything and they want me to keep bluffing on the turn. But if we use a small size here, they're going to check raise with that part of their range, and we just want that warning shot if we can get it. So I go ahead and make it 30, and then the villain thinks a little bit before throwing in the call. So we are off to a river, which is the 2 of clubs. When the big blind checks it over to me again, I really think if she had a straight or 2 pair, she would have check raised me on the turn. Maybe Queen Jack specifically might be playing it a bit timid because they do lose to a lot on this board, but I think most of their range is just going to be like suited King X combinations, maybe like a pair with a 10 or a pair with an ace that had a straight draw, and I don't think that range is going to be able to call an overbet here. So you know me, Lee, bluffing aggressively yet again. I go ahead and make it 160, and then the big blind is in the tank. She starts talking to me and she says, "You've either got the nuts or you've got nothing at all." When she says this, I'm pretty convinced that she's going to call because she kind of puts me on an all or nothing type of hand, but then to my surprise, she slides her cards in the muck. So let's go. We get the bluff through to kick things off in the 2-5 in Bonita Springs. Yeah, love to see it. Next hand, we're playing 7-handed and a passive under the gun player limps before I'm next to act in the low jack with ace-jack suited. Definitely a hand strong enough to ISO raise. I make it 25 and then the limper calls. So it heads up to a flop of King Jack 4 with 2 hearts. When the villain checks it over to me, definitely want to go ahead and value bet this hand against a passive opponent. I don't think they're going to fold any pair or any ace high on this board, even being out of position. So I go ahead and make it 20. Maybe could go a little bit larger against a passive opponent. Whatever the case though, they do decide to throw in the call, which we like seeing. So now we are heads up to a turn, which is the 6 of clubs. When the villain checks it over to me, I think we want to go ahead and check here. There are going to be a few worse hands that can continue to call bets here, but I think we might just make more EV in checking back here, protecting our range, and giving the opponent at least the opportunity to bluff with some of their ace-high calls on the flop or something with a gut shot like that. So I go ahead and check it back, and then we do see a river, which is the Queen of clubs, and the under the gun player bets out for 50, and really really not liking this situation. I think the villain is going to have like 100 two-pair combinations on this board, plus 10-9 and ace-10 got in as a straight. So maybe folding is the best option. I think maybe we're seeing me being late in the day and having so many delays before I finally got into the game sort of affects me a bit, and I kind of went on an autopilot mode and just called. I mean, I did check this on the turn to induce bluffs, so if that's worked, it'd kind of be insane to fold, but I really think I should have course corrected and realized this river is really good for my opponent's range. Whatever the case though, I make a pretty undisciplined call, and then the villain does show 10-9 of hearts. So yep, already making some mistakes to kick things off early in the session. Let's see if we can course correct and come back stronger the next hand. Next up, I am under the gun with ace-queen offsuit. I raise it up to 15, and then I only get called by a tight aggressive button. So it heads up to a flop of ace-king-5 rainbow. Starting off on me, I could go either way between betting or checking. I think if the SPR was a lot lower, like if my opponent had 300 effective in their stack or something, I would like going bet here to try and stack my opponent's worst ace-x. But when we are a bit deeper effective, there's going to be more incentive to protect my range here, induce some bluffs from the villain, etc. So I decided to check it in this instance. Really could go either way though, and then the villain checks back, which we weren't in love with. Whatever the case though, we are heads up to a turn, which is the 6 of spades. Now I definitely want to go ahead and bet. I think it's totally possible that my opponent could have checked back some of their weaker ace-x, which we'll have called, but the board just got so much wetter on this turn. There's much more straight draws, there's a flush draw now, so I just want to go ahead and bet a big size to try and get value. I make it 25, maybe could go a little bit larger, like 35 might be a better bet size, whatever the case, so slight mistake if it is one at all. I make it 25, and then the button does throw in the call. So we're heads up to a river, which is the 8 of clubs. The action's back on me here, and I think we want to continue betting here. If my opponent wants to hero call me down with any pair, we want to give them the opportunity to do so, and I think if we just check it to them, they're going to check back all of the hands they might have potentially bluff catched with. Maybe a weaker ace-x will bet for a small size, but I would rather bet larger and try and make more EV off those hands. So I decide to go ahead and bet 60, and then the button is in the tank, probably a good 30 seconds or so. Really think he's complaining a hero fold here, but eventually he does throw in the call. We love to see it. I show my ace-queen, and then the villain flashes the ace of diamonds before mucking. So let's go. I think the extended tank on the river is indicative of we probably made max value with our betting line here, which you love to see. G'day poker people, I'm here today to tell you about my new favourite app that is helping me improve my game day by day, and it is the Fastroll Poker app. Essentially what it is, it's a hand history tracker for live poker players, something akin to Poker Tracker for online poker. But they're bridging the gap and they're making it for live players, and following a very user-friendly, intuitive software. You can input the hand histories literally right after you're done playing them in a matter of seconds. It takes me about 15 to 30 seconds after I've played each hand, and they're stored on a database inside the app. And the beautiful thing about that is after the session's over, I can go back and look over the hands I've played and see what I'm doing well, and more commonly where I've punted off a lot of money, and thus helping me know what the leaks in my games are and then how I can plug them. So I cannot recommend this app strongly enough if you are a serious poker player. I've been offered many sponsorship deals in the past from things I think were a bit shady. This is the first thing I actually wanted to promote because I think it is actually a very good tool which will help you guys actually improve your poker game. So if you want to try it out, use the code LEEBETS when you purchase an annual subscription, and you'll get the first month free. If you don't like it after the first month, you're totally fine to cancel without charge, but I really think you guys are going to love this app, and can't recommend it strongly enough. It's a massive tool to help your game. So use the code LEEBETS on an annual subscription and you'll get the first month free. For now though, let's fast roll back into the gambling. So we're rolling, and then we're on to this next hand where a passive hijack open limps, and I'm in the cutoff with 10-9 of hearts. I also raise it up to 25, probably on the bottom end of my raising range here, but definitely can't be just folding this hand. I make it 25, and then I get called by a passive big blind as well as a limper. So we're 3 ways to a flop of jack 6-6 with 2 hearts, so we've got the flush draw here, and things get interesting when the big blind leads out for 75. The limper gets out of the way, the action's on me, and I think we have a pretty clear-cut call here. If the opponent was leading into me for like in a heads up pot, I would be less convinced that this is really strong, but I think leading with an overbet into two different opponents. This is a very strong line. I think most of their range is going to be a 6x or more likely a strong jack, just because they have more of those in their range and they will not be folding to a raise here in my opinion. So I throw in the call, playing this pot in position. We're off to a turn, which is a beautiful 8 of diamonds, giving us the open-ended straight draw to go with our flush draw. When the big blind bets 125, even though they don't have much money left behind in their stack, I really think calling is the clear-cut play here. If we go all in, the opponent is just going to call with all their jack X or better hands. But being that we're going to get to see the river in position, I think we're going to be able to play the rivers very easily, and I think we just stack them if we get there with any of our draws, in all honesty, when the SPR is going to be so low going into the river. So I make the easy call here, and then we are off to the river, fingers and toes crossed that the river is a heart, a queen, or a 7, and then the river is the ace of hearts. Let's go, you love to see it. And then the villain tanks maybe like 15 seconds before ripping it all in, and I have a pretty easy snap call here. Not totally impossible that the villain has a6, but we're going to pay them off if that's the case. I throw in the call, and then the villain shows queen jack off, so not good enough, mate. We end up scooping this pot with our river flush. Let's go. So we've got momentum on our side. Let's roll on to the next one. A passive cutoff, open limps, and I'm on the button with queen 8 of clubs. I raise it up to 25, and then the cutoff throws in the call. So it heads up to a flop of 5-4-3 rainbow with 1 club. When the villain checks it over to me, I definitely want to go ahead and stab on this board with a weak queen high. I think my opponent is going to have a million natural folds, being that they're limp calling with a lot of like offsuit Broadway type hands pre-flop. So I go ahead and make it 25, and then the villain does throw in the call. So when they throw in the call here, I think they at least have a pair, an ace high, or maybe something that has like an open-ended straight draw. There's a bunch of them on this board. We're off to a turn, which is the jack of hearts. The villain checks it over to me. This turn card should be a scare card for a lot of my opponent's range, but having said that, the fact that they've only got 175 behind in their stack is very concerning to me. I think I need to be very cautious of that when I am choosing a bet size. So what I ultimately decide to do here, which might be a little bit of fancy play, is I decide to down bet to 30. And my thinking behind this is it keeps the villain in with a lot of their like weak pairs with an open-ended straight draw. They're probably calling with all their straight draws, but what it does is it just keeps their range weak going into the river, where we continue to bluff them there when I rip it all in. And if I do get check raised here, which my opponent is probably always going to do with their 2 pair plus combos, then we just get the warning shot and we don't have to bluff into that strong range. So definitely a bit of fancy play, can very easily backfire because the opponent is going to call with hands that have a lot of equity, but we're going for it here. I bet 30, and then the cutoff doesn't think too long before calling. So we're off to the river, which is the 6 of diamonds. My plan was to rip it all in on any river, so when the opponent checks it over to me, that's what I go ahead and do. I rip it all in. Now, looking back, at the risk of seeming completely results tilted, I actually think I should have reconsidered that on this river in particular, just because I bet so small on the turn to keep my opponent in with a lot of weak hands that were like open-ended straight draws with a pair. Well, most of those hands are going to have 2 pair plus on this river, and I don't really think a passive opponent, after getting all the way to this river, will fold 2 pair to an all in. It's just not a good card to go for it on, in my opinion. So I really think I should have just given up here. Of course I didn't, though. You know me, I cannot help myself. I rip it all in for 145, and then the cutoff snap calls, like beats me in the pot, and they actually say out loud, I'm good, as they show pocket 7s. So definitely very unlucky that they got there on this river. Having said that, though, it's my bad for bluffing on this card. This is not my card to bluff. I ran bad that this was a river card, but I really shouldn't have needed to lose the extra 145. So definitely a big mistake there. Probably the first one of the session. This next one's a really interesting one, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. So there's 4 open limps before the actions on my button with ace-jack offsuit. I ISO raise it to 40, and then I only get called by a passive under the gun player. So it heads up to a flop of ace-queen 10 with 2 clubs. So let's go, you love hitting a top pair. When the villain checks it over to me, definitely want to go ahead and bet for value here. If the opponent's going to call with a gut shot, this is probably the best street to get value from that with. So, and I don't think a passive opponent is going to fold any pair unless it's like a pocket pair 9s or worse. So definitely want to get that value. I go ahead and make it 35, and then the under the gun player calls. So it heads up to a turn, which is the 6 of clubs, Do not love seeing it when the villain checks it over to me and the front door flush gets in. I think betting here might be a little bit too thin. They're definitely going to have plenty of flush draw combos in their range, but if they do have a pair worse than ace X, I think this turn is going to be really scary for them, and they're going to be liable to fold a lot here, which coincidentally I actually think this would be a great turn cut to bluff on, but since we have a value hand here, I decide to check it back and take a river in position, and the river is the Queen of Hearts. Pretty awful river because the opponent has plenty of Queen X combinations in their range. When they're passive and they limp call pre, they're probably doing it with a bunch of Broadway type stuff. Even when they check it over to me, I still think they're going to have a lot of Queen X combinations in their range. Like, I don't think they're just going to blindly bet them, particularly when the front door flush draw gets in as a passive opponent. Part of me is really, really tempted to go ahead and bet here because any ace X will call, probably a large bet here, but I think it's just a little bit too thin when the flush draw gets in, when my opponent has plenty of Queen X and they're just checking it to me a lot on the river. I think it's a little bit too thin to go for it. So after about 30 seconds of tanking, I do decide to check back, and then the villain shows me King Queen, so let's go. We did not value own ourselves on the river. Very happy about it because we would have got snapped off by the trips. Well, we're dodging bullets, baby. Okay, so we got the momentum rolling, at least in terms of how we're playing anyway, results, whatever. Whatever the case, I'm in the cutoff with King 9 offsuit. I make it 15, and then I get called by a passive button as well as a passive big blind. So we are 3 ways to a flop of Ace King 6 with 2 hearts, 1 spade. When the action checks to me, definitely just going to check this, try to get showdown as cheap as possible. I think both passive opponents are going to have a bunch of Ace X combinations in their range. So I check it, and then the button checks as well. So we do get a free turn, which is the 3 of spades, putting out backdoor spades. Now with the big blind checks it over to me, I definitely want to go ahead and bet for value here. It's not totally impossible that the button will have checked their ace X combinations on the flop, but I think there's no way the big blind did when the action checked through on the flop. So now I'm a little less worried about ace X, and I just want to go ahead and bet to get value from all of the draws that are possible on this board, and maybe some weaker pairs will call as well, particularly if it's passive opponents. So I go ahead and make it 20. Maybe I could go a little bit larger, like 30 would be better. Whatever the case, so I make it 20 here, and then I only get called by the big blind. So we're heads up to the river, which is a very interesting one. It is the King of Spades. So let's go, we make trips, but the backdoor flush draw does get in. When the villain checks it over to me, we've got another interesting spot, whether it's good to bet for thin value here or not. I mean, it doesn't seem like it'd be too thin to bet trips here, but it's just with our bad kicker, the opponent having a lower prevalence of ace X combinations when they did check it on the turn. I worry about value owning myself with a bet here, and being that they're a passive opponent calling 15 pre-flop, if they had like 7 deuce of spades here, I wouldn't be totally shocked. So again, I think the best play is to just check back and just play it cautious against passive opponents. Apparently, my reads weren't as dialed in as they were on the previous hand, and I did decide to go for the value here. I made it 45. Looking back, I really do think this is too thin, and as you can probably tell by me saying that and the potential results tilt, the villain does throw in the call with Jack 3 of spades, and look, really, I think I did this to myself. I mean, sure, it seems insanely nitty to say just check back trips here, but I think that is actually the best play against this opponent type. Let me know what you think in the comments below, though. So before this next hand started, I already announced that I was going to leave the table. Not something I typically do, and it kind of does backfire in this next hand a bit, as we're about to get into, but I was putting my chips in the rack. So whatever the case though, when we are in the under the gun position and we peel ace-queen offsuit, we're not going to fold this hand, whether it's our last hand or not. I go ahead and raise it up to 15, and then I get 2 callers before a loose aggressive small blind 3 bets to 60. When the action's back on me here, I think this is a really good spot to go for a 4-bet bluff / equity denial type thing. I think the loose aggressive player is going to be squeezing very aggressively, particularly since he knows I'm leaving the table soon. He thinks I might play a bit more risk averse, so I think his range might be a little bit wider in that instance, and it might be wide anyway, squeezing over a small raise and then 2 cold calls pre-flop. So I decide to go for it here. I decide to raise to 150. The opponent had about 700 in their stack, so we do have a pretty easy fold. We're like we're not priced in or anything if the opponent does go all in, but I think it's like still big enough where I'll be able to fold out my opponent's weaker ace-x type stuff, maybe even some bad pocket pairs like pocket nines or something. And if not, we still get to play the pot in position against that range. So I go ahead and make it 150, and then the 2 cold callers fold before the small blind doesn't think too long before ripping it all in for 700. So our 4-bet bluff has not worked. I think we have a pretty easy fold here. So I muck my hand and keep racking up my chicks. Racking up my chips because it's time to go home, I think. So there you go. They were the most interesting hands we played for over this pretty brief 4-hour, 20-minute nice session today. Overall, in terms of my play, I was pretty happy with a lot of the decisions I made. I don't think there was any huge egregious errors, except for maybe the ace-jack call-off and the queen-8 bluff. Just should have been more tuned in into what the river card was instead of just autopilot going with my plan. In terms of the other hands I played, I'm largely pretty happy. Maybe the king-9 offsuit bet on the river is a little bit too thin, but I mean, like, come on, I river trips. It can't be that thin. So, not totally disappointed with my play or anything. Just those few mistakes holding me back from an A grade. So I'm going to go with a B+ today. Definitely could do better and hope I do better in the morning. Of course, I returned to the hotel room and got to sleep before hopping into the next day when I played at Bonita Springs yet again for their high hand promotion, which was the following day. Oh, and by the way, I did make $91 on the session, so that'll be enough to pay for gas there and back at the very least, and doesn't quite cover the hotel room. Whatever the case, we were back in the next day, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and you'll get that video when it comes out. That was an absolutely crazy session. Definitely more hands, more action hands than this session, so hit subscribe and you'll get it when it comes out. For now though, I'm out of here. Live deliciously.